There's no denying the fact that the White House and Ehrlichman, Hallam, and Dean are involved in some of the early money decisions. I would say these people are going to cost $1 million over the next few years.
You, on the money, if you need the money,
I saw the tapes being played for the committee, and I watched their faces, both Democrats and Republicans. I looked from one side to the other side, and I saw them getting red and agitated, unbelieving.
Where money is, you can get $1 million, and you can get it in cash. I know where it can be gotten.
And I thought, oh, wonderful. It's coming across. But then, all of a sudden, my joy diminished, and I said, you'll see, they'll come back a day or two later with rationalizations, with ways of explaining things.
It's very difficult to infer that material on a given tape is detrimental to the president when all of the participants to that conversation have testified in other forums under oath and have not revealed anything detrimental to the president.
Good. Thank you very much.
Sure.
He didn't believe that he was involved in a criminal act. And to tell you the truth, I didn't either.
You don't have to be a constitutional lawyer to know that the Constitution is very precise in defining what is an impeachable defense, an impeachable offense. A criminal offense on the part of the president is the requirement for impeachment. I do not expect to be impeached.
The president now tried to turn the tables on the impeachment committee. They were demanding yet more tapes, and Nixon knew he could not refuse the body empowered to judge him. Instead, he gambled on releasing the transcripts, but first he carefully doctored them.
He was worn out, dead tired. I couldn't have done it. I don't know how he physically did it. The most remarkably disciplined individual I've ever known in terms of his mind's control over his faculties. And he did it all. To the best of my knowledge, he cleared every one of those volumes, and they stacked up in the Oval Office, as you know, several feet high.
I have been reluctant to release these tapes, not just because they will embarrass me and those with whom I have talked, which they will, and not just because they will become the subject of speculation and even ridicule, which they will. I have been reluctant because in these and in all the other conversations in this office, people have spoken their minds freely.
Senate Republican leader Hugh Scott told reporters today that he has read 800 of the 1,300 pages of edited presidential transcripts. He said the transcripts reveal, quote, a shabby, disgusting, immoral performance by all of the people involved.
It was a spectacular own goal. Nixon hoped to overwhelm his critics with sheer volume, but the public were appalled by the language and fascinated by the number of expletives deleted, which the president's defenders tried to blame on his lawyer.
Fred Bizard, a lawyer, a good lawyer, but he was nevertheless a lay Baptist minister. And he was very much offended whenever Richard Nixon said hell. Very much offended. And so he excised that. And Richard Nixon said hell a lot, I guess, because there were lots of expletive deleteds in the tapes.
I fouled up in the area where I'm supposed to be a master, the area of just politics. I'm not proud of what I did. I was appalled by some of the statements that appeared, although I wish they hadn't said expletives deleted. I wish they'd put them in, because they weren't as bad as many people think they were, although they were horrible enough.
In the big cities, calls for Nixon's resignation mounted. In the past, the president could ignore demonstrations, confident that Middle America was still with him. But now the president's popularity plummeted, and he became even more dependent upon conservatives, particularly the Southern Democrats.
I'll stay here and try to learn how to use the yo-yo. You'll go up and be president.
George Wallace, the governor of Alabama, was one of the Southern Democrats who had delivered Nixon votes in the past. The president was wooing Dixie because he needed their representatives on Capitol Hill.
The key element there was the so-called boll weevils of the South, the Southern Democratic group of about 30 congressmen in the House. And as long as he could hold them together along with the Republicans, he was probably safe from an impeachment vote.
In fact, the president's survival rested on just 7 members of the Judiciary Committee. 3 Southern Democrats and 4 moderate Republicans who could swing it either way. But would a Republican congressman impeach a Republican president?
I think we were all reluctant to pull that sword out of the scabbard.
Congressman Cohen was called to an early morning meeting by one of his Republican colleagues who was gathering together the potential rebels.
I walked into his office that morning, and I was quite surprised, frankly, to see Jim Mann and Walter Flowers, and those were the 2 Southern Democrats that we felt would have great difficulty in voting for articles of impeachment.
It really made me feel reassured that 4 Republican members, as well as the other 2 Southern Democrats, all of whom were having to express views that their constituency might not support, had come to the same conclusion that the evidence was such that it was necessary to bring charges.
I recall Walter Flowers stand up and say, let's shake this thing up and dump it out and see what things we can agree upon. What are all the allegations, and there were many, do we think that this group here could agree that an impeachable offense had been committed?
This surprising coalition offered their support to the mainstream Democrats, but they insisted on limiting the offenses to be included in the articles of impeachment.
We did not want to have a laundry list of charges that were undirected and uncoordinated, that we really wanted to reflect our deep concerns about the obstruction of justice, the abuse of power, and the continuing nature of the offenses, which had started before the Watergate and continued until the time that we were meeting.
News of their defection traveled fast.
They were perceived in the House to be somewhat conservative, supporters of the president, and for them uniformly to abandon the president carried far greater weight than their vote.
Nixon, frantic to get the 3 Southern Democrats back on side, had his chief of staff phone Governor Wallace of Alabama to ask for help.
His assistant got on, he said the governor is not available, only the president will talk to him. And I knew we had a problem, so I went in, asked the president to call the governor immediately. He did.
He said, well, this is the first I've ever heard about this. He said, I don't believe that there's anything I can do to be helpful.
And the president said, George, are you still with me? And the governor said, no, I'm sorry, Mr. President, I am not. And the president hung up, looked at me and said, Al, I just lost the presidency.
The next day, the 38 members of the House Judiciary Committee opened their debate on the motion to impeach the president.
Resolved that Richard M. Nixon, President of the United States, is impeached for high crimes and misdemeanors, and that the following articles of impeachment be exhibited to the Senate.